how do you know how to actually measure success in change? What does that look like? Who needs to be involved? How do you pull that forward? That's a lot of the stuff that we started looking at with this section, and that really informed the questions that we started putting together. So you go back to the process that we follow. This was one of those topics that just bubbled up and became pretty apparent that it'd be well worth looking into. So a couple of things that we looked at first were performance measurement and outcomes. So the organizations that are measuring and actually doing this, how does it impact the outcomes in terms of achieving change success? We also asked questions about what are the biggest obstacles that people are running into? What are the biggest adaptations that they make to those obstacles? What are the reasons if they're not doing it? What are their reasons? Why not? We also asked about the roles in defining success. And then lastly, we got down to that very specific item of what are the actual metrics that people are using to measure change and what goes into that. So again, I want to take a little bit of time to dive into each of these. So with the first point, I'm just going to jump to the punchline first. And it's this, that when organizations define and measure performance to objectives, they are more likely to meet or exceed objectives than those that don't define their projects or measure performance well. So to show how that kind of plays out in the data, when it comes to goal definition, we ask this question of how well were project objectives and goals defined on your project? And then respondents would say anything from very poorly up to very well. And you can see the distribution of those responses. We then take that piece of data and we do a correlation to say if we kind of impose or put on top of that this question that we ask about, did you meet or exceed objectives on your project? We get some really interesting findings when we combine that data. So what we see now is that for those who reported that their goals and objectives were very poorly defined, only 14% of them reported that they met or exceeded their objectives. On the other side, you can see that those who reported that they did very well in defining those objectives and goals, that jumps up to 80%. So that's the kind of stuff that we love to see, that trend, that pattern that starts emerging within the data. We also asked a question about actual performance measurement. So it's not only defining it at the beginning, but did you actually measure compliance and overall performance to objectives? And we asked on a scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree. Again, we see a distribution, but then we do the same thing, that we go and overlay that item of meeting or exceeding objectives. And again, we see that nice pattern that emerges where those who strongly disagreed that they measured compliance and overall performance, only 18% of them met or exceeded their objectives. On the other side, those who strongly agreed that they measured compliance and overall performance to objectives, 72% of them reported that they met or exceeded their objectives on the project. So again, that nice relationship that we like to say, all to establish that it does seem to have a really strong correlation to meeting objectives.